The Milwaukee Bucks badly want to make some trades to revamp their roster, but the problem, nobody wants to trade with them. What's going on the Bucks trade front, and will they be able to find a deal? Let's take a look at what they could do and who their potential targets are. I'm Trevor Lane. This is the Basketball Bulletin. Make sure you subscribe right here to the channel, joined by Donnie Freeman. Donnie, the funny thing, looking at our numbers for our channel, we've got, I believe it was about 20% of the people that are viewing our videos are actually subscribed. So that leaves 80% still out there. That's a lot of people that still need to subscribe to our channel.
Absolutely. So I don't know what you're doing, but make sure you subscribe because we cover the entire league. We're going to drop all the trade stuff as it comes out, all rumors, all that stuff. So this is your one-stop shop. Make sure you stick around.
Absolutely. All right, let's get into it. Here we go. This is from Brett Siegel of Clutch Points. The Milwaukee Bucks. No team has shown interest in making a deal with the Milwaukee Bucks at this time. Womp, womp, womp. Marjan Beauchamp and Pat Connaughton. Man, I butchered Marjan's last name. And Pat Connaughton are the two players the Bucks have made available in trade discussions in order to try to add talent on the wing. Veteran forward Torrey Craig from the Chicago Bulls is a player Milwaukee has shown interest in, sources said, but rival teams would much rather discuss Bobby Portis if he was available to become available for the trade deadline. Yeah, I mean, Donnie, if I'm a rival team, if I'm trying to make a trade with the Bucks, Bobby Portis is definitely the guy I'm interested in. But if I'm Milwaukee, that's also the guy that if I can avoid it, I really don't want to trade.
Yeah, that's true. He's another guy. Like I'm sure that their entire roster is littered with this, or where it's guys that are playing below what you'd expect. I mean,
Yeah.
the field goal percentage, 3-point percentage, the net rating, of course. But just because they got off to such a rocky start to the season, that's been mostly the case for him. But I would like to say that I do think Bobby is a guy that you can at least have and retain for a few years here. If you're Milwaukee, he's 29, so you could have him for a few more years. He's not over that 30 yet, although he will be in a few months. But regardless, I think he's another bigger forward that you can retain and plug alongside your guys. And we've seen him have big moments in Milwaukee as well. So I understand why teams would want him, but I also understand why they potentially could want to keep him. But the fun thing is this was more so back when their slide was going. I saw a lot of fans were upset at Bobby and basically just didn't want to keep him anymore. So if you're a fan of the Bucks, post down below what your opinions on Bobby.
That's interesting because from an opposing team standpoint, he's a guy that I'd definitely be interested. Now he's shooting just 32% from three on the season, but he tends to shoot much better. He's a 38% career 3-point shooter. So I think regression will hit there in a positive way. 13 points right now, 7 boards for Bobby Portis Jr. For the Bucks. But this piece also was added to this here. If Pat Connaughton was on the Warriors. Now, this was referencing some Warriors potential trades here that we're taking this from, but it's no secret to anyone around the league that the Bucks are desperately looking to add depth and length on the wing, and Pat Connaughton's $9.4 million contract is one of Milwaukee's only paths to potentially adding talent since they are a second apron team and can't aggregate salaries. Okay, so let's talk about that. So what that means is that if, let's say, the Bucks wanted to try to make a trade to go get a player that's making, say, $20 million, and in order to match salaries, you were going to stack up Bobby Portis and Pat Connaughton to get there financially. You can't do that. You can't combine any salaries. You can only trade one because they're a second apron team. You can only trade one player out by themselves. Now, if it was, say, a 2-for-2 deal and you could make it work as 2 1-for-1 trades, you could do that. You could break a trade up, but oftentimes the math doesn't work when you try to do that. So that is an added restriction that Milwaukee has. They can't combine salaries in order to make a trade work. And that's going to make it very, very difficult for them to find the kind of deal that they're looking for.
Yeah, definitely. That's going to be one of the main things that a lot of these teams in the same boat are going to struggle with as well, which is why it's going to be difficult for some of these teams just to make moves in general, although we do think there are going to be a lot of names in the market. Speaking of names in the market, we did a video previously where we talked about the top wings, or some of the wings. I don't want to say top, but some of the wings out there that are on the market, and Pat was one of those guys. Interesting thing on Pat, while you were talking, I did a little bit of research on him, and apparently he got a DNP last game, so he may very well be out of the rotation. He hasn't, I don't know if he's had an injury issue or anything like that, but he hasn't played in a game for meaningful minutes since November 12th against the Raptors, where he put up 6 points on 2 of 7 shooting. And like I said with Bobby, I'm sure if you look at their roster, a lot of their guys are kind of underperforming with what you would expect. But some of the things I do think about Bobby in terms of like positive regression, I'm not so sure exist in that same way for Pat. He's never been anything other than a streaky shooter, okay defender, things like that. So I'm not sure if he's a guy at 32 with another year on the belt here that you're going to be looking for to really add to a lot of teams. But who knows? Maybe he can do that, and he has some championship experience, so maybe you can get he can be a nice veteran piece for some of these teams.
Well, and they really need Chris Middleton back in the mix and playing well. They need him back to being Chris Middleton. Now, Pat Connaughton, the problem with Connaughton being the guy that they would like to move on from and using that salary as a trade piece, the problem is he's got that player option. And based on the numbers that he's putting up right now, $9.4 million next season, he's picking that up. He's picking that up. And most teams don't want to take long-term money on the books. So Pat Connaughton, the only way that his salary, I'm not saying teams are going to go trade for Pat Connaughton specifically. You're probably going to need to add some draft capital, something like that to sweeten the deal here. But the only teams that are going to trade for Pat Connaughton are either teams that are getting something, some type of draft pick, or they are sending back a worse contract, maybe even a 3-year deal or something like that. That's the only incentive for teams to take Pat Connaughton. Bobby Portis, I think, is a little bit of a different story. There's a number of teams around the NBA that could use him. Brook Lopez at 36 years old, the age will be a concern. $23 million, that's a big salary. But there's enough teams that need centers to where maybe somebody decides to take a flyer on him, at least as a stopgap for a season, if the Bucks decide to really move on from him. But here's the good thing for Milwaukee. They have started to win games. Well, there's 2 good things. Number 1, they've started to win games. Number 2, they play in the East, which means you don't even have to be a 500 team to be in the playoffs. The Bucks, again, we talked about this the other day, how the Bucks, the Sixers, their seasons are not over because thankfully the East is very, very forgiving. So here the Bucks are. They've won a few games, and now they're 7-9, and that's good enough to put them in the 6th seed in the East. That's all it takes. A 3-game win streak. Boom, you're a playoff team in the Eastern Conference. It's amazing. But look at this. Look at the schedule. We knew this with this schedule. This was their chance. This was their opportunity. Look at who they've been playing. My God. You got New York, Boston. Ouch. Those are tough matchups. Then you go Toronto, Detroit, Charlotte, Houston, Chicago, Indiana. If ever there was a chance for the Bucks to make a push, get themselves back in the thick of things, it was going to be right now. That if they didn't win games over the last week and a half, that was going to be a big red flag. That was going to be a big problem, and that was going to be a sign that they are truly, truly done. Whereas if they capitalize on this stretch and they stack up wins, they can get themselves back in the mix, and they have capitalized. Again, beating Toronto, beating Detroit, beating Houston. Beating Houston is an impressive win. Houston's a good team, but Chicago, Indiana as well, they're a pretty good team. Beating them, that was a big deal. Lost to Charlotte, but only by a point. They get Charlotte again here coming up this evening. They'll play against Charlotte as we're recording this, so we'll see how they do in that one. But the Milwaukee Bucks, they took advantage of this soft schedule in front of them. They stacked up wins, and now I think you look ahead: Charlotte, Washington, Detroit. Not bad in terms of the schedule ahead as well. It does get a little more difficult when you hit Boston and Cleveland again, but they've got opportunities here to stack up some.
They should be well over 500 at that point.
They should be. I mean, look at this. Charlotte, I mean, Miami, they can win that one for sure. Washington, Detroit, Atlanta, Boston. You're not going to, you wouldn't favor them to win Boston or Cleveland, but the other games, I'd probably favor them in all of them. Brooklyn, Washington, my goodness. Brooklyn, Washington, Chicago, Chicago.
Oh my God.
Wow. Merry Christmas, Milwaukee.
Wow. Yeah, they're gonna be in the top 3 seed by the time we check back in on them in New Year's.
that is a hell of a schedule. So they should be able to stack up wins here, but maybe this emboldens them even further if they are right back in the mix of things here in the Eastern Conference to really try to find a trade and give them that other piece that takes them to the next level.
Yeah, I just don't know who or what that specifically is. I feel like they've got most of the player archetypes on their roster already. It's just, are they being utilized properly, which is a different thing with the coaching that they have over there. Are they putting these guys in positions to be successful? And also positive regression, because like I've said a couple of times throughout the video, a lot of these guys are playing below what they're supposed to be. It's just kind of weird because a lot of these guys are older. So you don't really know if, like, for example, Brook has actually turned into what he is now, or if he's going to regress in a positive way to being more of what he used to be. I will say, like, on the Brook thing, he's an interesting one because I think he's old. Yeah, he's about 36. I think that he does have limitations, especially on the defensive side with mobility, defending in space, but he's still one of the better rim protectors in the league. And still, in theory, is a 3-and-D center if the three ball is going for him. I mean, he's taking 5 per game and he's shooting 33. I feel like a lot of teams would be okay with that. 5 per game, 33, 34%. He's better than that traditionally, but I feel like if he's going to give you 2 blocks too, I feel like most teams would be okay with that, and I'm not sure why the Bucks would be much different. I think what they need is, and this is maybe where you move off of Portis if you were going to do that. I would ideally keep the younger guy, but hypothetically speaking, in favor of Brook, maybe they need a more, versatile defensive center to be the backup option there, and that could be something that they're looking for too.
You look at this is Brook Lopez's game log for the month of November. Pretty solid. I mean, 50% from the field, 36% from 3, 13 points. He was in a little bit of a slump to start the season. He's back to kind of being himself, hitting the threes that you would expect him to hit. But the only thing is the production, it's kind of all over the place. I mean, you've got 1 point, 7 points, and then you also have 29 points. Like he rides that. What's that?
320 games in four games. He's got 20 pointers up there. So interesting production.
Yeah, kind of all over the place. But I think it's a sign that he's a guy who is at least getting back to being what he was. I don't think the Bucks are totally out of this or anything like that. But and we'll see what they look like when Chris Middleton comes back. But I think if they want to be a contender, I think they need a trade. I think they need maybe multiple trades. And the challenge is, I don't know that they've got the pieces, the draft capital, enticing players to really get a trade done. So, but it's not going to be for a lack of trying. I think they're going to do everything they can to make a move. And it'll be interesting to see if they're really going out there after wings on the market. There are a number of them out there, but can they get themselves into the discussion for a Dorian Finney-Smith, for a Cam Johnson, for a Kyle Kuzma, for a Jeremy Grant, for any of those kinds of guys? There's more to add to the list, but can they get themselves into that conversation given the assets that they've got? I've got some real questions about whether or not they're able to, but they're certainly going to try, and I'll be curious to see what they can do.
Yeah, same here. I wanted to ask you, on the topic here, say that, because we're looking at their schedule. Say that they rebound their schedule in a meaningful way. They wind up a top 3 seed. Do you think there's any chance that maybe they're not able to get the trades they're specifically wanting? Do you think there's any chance that they talk themselves into believing that, we just got off to a slow start? We're better than that. I mean, because they are better than what they were, right?
Sure.
Having freaking Giannis and Dame should tell you that, in the Eastern Conference especially. Do you think there's any chance they kind of just talk them into that type of thought process and stand pat? Maybe they can make a run if things break right.
Yeah, I think if Chris Middleton comes back and he looks good, then that will go a long way towards doing that. But because I think the way their salary situation is, that says they should probably stand pat, that it's going to be difficult for them to really make that move. But so what's out there, they are probably going to be forced into that decision. But it's also possible that Chris Middleton comes back, he looks good. If you could pick up some marquee wins, let's say Friday, December 20th, you beat Cleveland. Let's say, or you get a win December 6th against Boston. And remember, there's going to be games added in there. There's a gap there because of the NBA Cup. They don't have 12 days off here. There's going to be a gap because NBA Cup games are going to be added in there. So keep that in mind. There's going to be more games coming in here. But yeah, I do think that if they're able to pick up a few statement wins, a few wins that make them say, okay, we're back, then maybe they do just say, you know what, this is going to be such an uphill battle for us to find a trade anyway. Let's just take our foot off the gas on the trade front, and we'll run with this as is. So, but again, Chris Middleton's got to come back, and they've got to win some of these big games.
Definitely, I agree with you.
All right, everybody, give us your thoughts in the comments down below, and don't forget to go check out our latest video, which is on the trade front. We got one on Marcus Smart. We've got one talking about the conference. I talked about the Eastern Conference a little bit and how it's very forgiving for the Bucks. We've got one about that. Go check that out on what's going on. West GMs not happy with the situation, and they want a drastic change in the NBA. So go check out that video right now.